I've got one question for you. Are any of you in a partnership right now? A business partnership or and how many of you are contemplating being in a partnership? So when we started in business, our vision at that time, as limited as it was, we were in our young 20s, we decided that we wanted to find a small business to buy. We thought we could create wealth faster if we were involved in owning a business as opposed to working for someone. And so our vision was that we would go out and find some small businesses, primarily businesses founded after World War II by returning veterans. We thought there were a bunch of those old guys around wanting to sell. So we started wandering around the area looking for a small business to buy. Grant had started his career in banking, and I was working for Wolverine Worldwide in Rockford on acquisitions and mergers that they were doing. So we felt particularly suited to go around and find a small business, so we bought one, then we bought another, and then we bought another, totally leveraged, all borrowed money, and started our adventure. But early in our experience, probably 2 years in, we met a gentleman who, and you know, we thought we were really above average. And we met this guy, and he said, "So what are you guys trying to do?" And we said, "Well, we're trying to build wealth, and you know, we're really on our way." And he said, "You know," he says, I've been around the world several times." He said, "I'm telling you, partnerships don't work." And we're like, you know, this guy's kind of a downer. And so we thought, well, you know, actually we were staying in his house at the time, so we thought, well, we need to be polite and get out of here. But as the week wore on, we kind of circled back to him and asked him what he meant. And he said, "Well, let me ask you a couple of questions." So he asked us, he said, "So, like, do you guys know Jesus?" And we're like, you know, Grant said, "Oh yeah, I've Catholic schools all the way through." I said, "Hey, I'm Christian schools all the way through." "Sure, you know, we know him." And he said, "Well, you know, maybe if you would pray together." "You guys pray together?" We said, "No, we don't do that." He said, "Well, maybe you could do that." And he said, "All I'm saying is that if you're a great success in your partnership, you're going to fight about money. If you fail, you're going to leave and go get jobs, and you'll probably never see each other again. So I'm just saying, maybe if you based your relationship on something other than the success or failure of what you're trying to do, you might stay together." And of course, at that time, I don't think either of us were thinking about trying to stay together for any reason other than making money. And we still think a lot about that. So we went home from that encounter and said, "Well, okay, you want to start praying together?" And he also said, "Why don't you meet together once a week and have dinner and talk about your families, and just start praying together." So with that, we went home and started this adventure. And from time to time, he would send people through to visit us, see how we were doing, ask us questions. A lot of kind of penetrating questions. And we were starting to have young families, and you're in that hyper busy time of your life, and the idea of trying to incorporate Jesus into your life felt like a big interruption. But fast forward 38 years, or 36 years since then, and I think we would both report that it's brought life to our life. I was with some partners this week in Detroit, who have been very successful together. And they're about 9 years into their partnership, and we sat down. It was kind of a casual time together. And one of the things in Christendom that you hear people say is, well, you don't want to sweep things under the rug. You know, you've got to bring these issues out to the light. So one of the guys opened up his comments by saying, well, I think we're doing pretty good right now. I think we're keeping short accounts with each other. We're honest with each other. And I think it's really working good. And I said, do you guys trust each other? And they're like, oh yeah, that's not a problem. I said, well, has any of you ever stole anything from each other or took something that you knew maybe it wasn't yours to take? And they're like, no, that's never been a problem. And I said, so what is there then that you might sweep under the rug? And this spoke volumes to me. I don't think it didn't mean much to them. But the thing I would report to you that's challenging in a partnership is not the facts. Particularly if you're in a business partnership, because the facts are pretty evident. We love metrics. We've got all kinds of little reports on every little thing. And of course, as you know, our generation has created 10 different ways to do metrics. So the facts are the facts. It's the interpretation, it's the communication, it's the look, where that's what gets us. It's, what did you know and when did you know it? And how come you didn't tell me sooner? Or did you intend to tell me? It's all that little junk that really is very divisive and very much erodes, I think, a relationship. So we talked last night. Claire said no notes. Don't take any notes. Don't read anything. So this is totally off the top of our heads. But one of the things we get into in situations like this, and to be honest with you, we've rarely ever done this. Rarely. But we said last night, well, who's going to go first? Which, you think about that, who cares, right? But it's a funny little thing over all the years, because sometimes if we get in a situation, Grant will say, well, thanks a lot. You didn't chime in until the end of the meeting. You made me look like a jerk. And that can happen vice versa very easily. And so even something a little simple like that, you realize that navigating a relationship and competition is really challenging. So I'll hand it over to Grant. The other thing we were told, and so we're going to do this, is to be very brief and allow as many questions as there might be, if any. So.
Does that mean don't say much?
No. Just don't want to make me look bad.
No, I won't. The funny thing is I almost put a check shirt on this morning.
Sorry.
I didn't want to look like the Bobbsey twins. Anyway, this whole thing about the partnership, we've been on this grand experiment since we had this trip to Washington, D.C. And when he told us to go back and meet together regularly on a weekly basis and learn to talk about how we felt about things, what was going on in our families, that's pretty foreign to us. Most guys, the whole feeling part of it's not a big deal. And so we've been on this journey of learning to do that, of meeting together regularly, of discussing what's going on in our lives, and then praying together. And at first it was kind of rough, and it was awkward. And I think after a while we kind of got into a groove with it, but it brought us into all these categories that Jerry's talking about. You got to talk about forgiveness. You got to talk about how you stepped over the line, irritated one another. And so, you can kind of think, well, that sounds like a couple of old ladies talking about it. But it's the glue that's really kept us together. It's being willing to come back to the table after you're hurt and kind of attempt to work through it. And we haven't always done it very well. We've had to call in the cavalry on several occasions, and these friends of ours that we've been involved with that are in this pursuit of following this person Jesus have, held our nose to some things that have been uncomfortable. And it persists. I think a lot of it's human nature. And I would tell you the thing I've learned about myself in trying to work through this with Jerry is I'm basically a selfish person. And you don't like to have that brought to your attention. But when you think about what are the things I think about, it's mostly centered around what I like and what I want to do and things I'm planning to acquire or buy or something like that. So it forces you to the table to have some honest discussion about the things that are important in life. And we've been through a lot of circumstances together. I can't even begin to tell you. And when you're involved in owning a business, as many of you are, you get the full scale of people waiting in line at the door to discuss their problems. And I think in this journey, I think one of the things we've learned is that being other-focused works. When you're focused on something other than yourself, if you're trying to incorporate some of these principles into your life, you realize that you don't do it very well. And, we're not up here trying to tell you that we've got it down because we don't. We're just, the old saying goes, we're two pilgrims on a road trying to figure it out. And oftentimes we find ourselves in the ditch and need help to do it. But, as I look back, it's 38 years of being together. It's going through tough times. It's enjoying the successes. And the one business that we're in right now has kind of come to a close. We've sold it a few times and contracts up, and we're done at the end of the year. So right now we're in this process of saying goodbye to a lot of people, and it's just an interesting season. And so as we venture out, we're taking these principles that we're still struggling with and trying to work through them. And I would say that's been the heart of our relationship. And I think as a result of our effort, regardless of how well we think we do with it, I think that as a result of that, we've had some incredible relationships. Some amazing people have been put in our lives, and it's been a gift to us. I don't have much else to say on that. I'll pass it back to you.
One of the things that we were told years ago that also I think we've leaned into the idea and have tried to live with it, but this idea that one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. And you see that in the scriptures and you kind of go, that's clever, it's an interesting idea. But the thing we've seen is, as we've done our business lives together, people are very curious about it. The business people we've interacted with are like, well, you guys always appear together, you guys always work with us or against us together. And we've told our kids this, that if you guys work together, if you guys really learn how to lay your lives down for each other, it gives you incredible authority that you really, the older you get, you realize you don't deserve it. But I think it's kind of God's admonition to us. Jesus said, well, then they'll know you love me by the way you love each other. That's it. You don't have to have a great talk. You don't have to memorize Bible verses. If you would just learn to love each other, they'll know you're with me. And I think the thing we've seen over and over and over, and we're always taken aback by it, is, God, these people are actually listening to us. They're actually, they actually think we've got something to offer. And so I think over the years, a lot of these ideas that we've prayed about and worked on, we've really started to really see it in all aspects of life. The other thing, and Grant touched on this, is we have needed an ocean of help to stay together. We have 4 guys who are on our board. They are constantly working with us to help us navigate misunderstanding, helping us to navigate that look, helping us to navigate all the things that Grant talked about that we both wrestle with. Because one of the problems of, one of the things they've said to us is, you have to say you're rich. We're like, hey, we're not there yet. And they're saying, hey, we're telling you, you're rich. So you kind of go, okay, well, what does that mean? West Michigan, no one says they're rich, right? We're still working. We like work, we venerate work and education. And so we've had to kind of say, okay, and then what does that mean? And what is our responsibility to do with what we have? And what should we be teaching our children on this subject? So all that to say is we've needed a lot of help. Grant said, somewhat in passing, so what are you talking about? One big thing is, are you talking? And, we had a little discussion late in the day yesterday, and I was driving home, and he called me, he says, are you okay? And it was kind of like, I think I am. But it's a great question. Because all of us live in a fairly tension-filled environment, either every day or from week to week or month to month. There's something that we're wrestling with. And to have somebody say, are you okay, is really, really helpful. So with that, it's question time, if you have it.
What are some things that you two do in your life, maybe more detailed things that help the partnership stay together?
What do we do to keep the partnership together?
Yeah, just like some actual actions that you two carry out.
Well, I think the biggest thing is meeting together. It's the easiest thing to put off. And there have been times when it's slipped, but if you're not meeting together with your partner, it drifts. And there are very few relationships that absence makes the heart grow fonder, as the saying goes. And that's what happens. You don't come to the table and talk. Before long, you get all this stuff that, use the term, swept under the rug. Then you got real problems. I would say the other one thing that we've been working on for a long time is trying to figure out how to build agreement in a particular subject, so that we're both on the same page, so that we can say, yes, we agree, we're moving forward with this. And that's not been a real easy thing to do either. That's where each of us come to the table and have our own set of biases and strong desires. And you got to figure out how to work through it, so that when we leave the room, we say, yes, we're on the same page, let's do it. And we've had a lot of help on that one too. So, there are times when I think both of us feel we're still in the remedial class as it relates to relationships. But I think with all the help that we've had, it's enabled us to stay together. Brian?
I don't know if you're, quote, equal partners on paper or in actuality, but how important is it to be an equal partner? Or isn't it? Can you be a partner? Can you make a partnership work when you're not equal financially, equal commitment-wise, etc.?
That's a good question. I think all the legal beagles, if we have any in the room, will tell you avoid that like the plague. The whole equal partnership thing, one doesn't dominate over the other. It can be a nightmare. And I think There have been a lot of well-publicized relationships that have started out that way that have ended up in courts and all that sort of thing. So I would tell you that against all the legal advice, and we've had a lot of advice that says don't do that, that's what we did. And so we have been equal partners in just about everything that we have done. Now, when we have ventured off and done more of a divide and conquer, we have found when we look back that the best way that we do things is when we do them together. There's more strength in it. But yet financially, we have always been 50-50 partners.
So when you're 50-50 and you both have different opinions of how something should be done, you touched on that you have a group of people, advisors, if you will. How have you organized that so that when you leave that table, if you have a disagreement fundamentally on how things should be progressed, how is that organized? You have two people or one person, three people that sit there and say, hey, you don't pass straws, and this person's actually got a more solid ground than this person, or how do you overcome those difficulties when you are 50-50? Because that's what I meant. Our business is 50-50, and we have fundamental differences sometimes on how we should get there. We both want to get to the same point, but how do we get to there?
Well, I'd like to tell you an easy formula. But the truth of the matter is, it isn't easy. You sit and you work through it, and you give your perspective, your partner's perspective, you get people to weigh in on theirs, and hopefully you can come to some sort of agreement on how you're going to move forward. And oftentimes, it's not a 20-second deal, you know? Might take a few days. That's where we've had the benefit of people come along and help us. And I think in that process, you know, learning to communicate how you think and feel about things is important to do. And Jerry and I are very different personality-wise. And so we've had to have people come in and say, okay, now let's sit down and work through this. And at the end of the day, you know, I mentioned earlier, it's not all about me. And so there are times when you have to lay down what you want to make it work. And it's not compromise, but it's learning to come to a point where you can both agree to move forward. And if you can't, we don't move forward.
I think too on that subject is, it takes a fundamental belief to look at it and say, this is better for me if I'm in this relationship, even if this is painful. And, you know, we in our culture are so into winning and losing and assessing life from that perspective. Did I win that argument? Did I lose that argument? And I think if you go into these things, and this is where the legal profession, I mean, bless their hearts, they're trying to write down what the two of us are going to agree to. And they're going to try to presuppose every bad thing that's going to happen so that we can get out of this. And we've kind of looked at it and said, we're in this, we're not going anywhere. We're going to have some really difficult times, we're going to have misunderstandings, we're going to have differences of opinion, but at the end of the day, I'm not going anywhere. And I have to kind of have that fundamental beginning place over every day, every argument, every situation, is no matter how painful this is or how much I disagree with you, I'm not going anywhere. And that's a hard road to sign up for. And all I would say is if you stay with it, over a long period of time, you'll look back and say, this overall way benefited me. And, you know, one of the things we've talked about a lot in terms of personal is our children. You know, we have 11 children between us. They're all very different one from the other. You know, we live next door to each other for years. Our wives are friends. And we've got every relational dynamic I can think of going on. And kids are competing, the kids are, some have gone through periods of great success, some have gone through periods of great challenges, and on top of that, we have business issues we're arguing about, or discussing, or trying to navigate. So I think it's a matter of saying, okay, fundamentally, this idea of being in a partnership is good for me. And I would say being in a partnership with Grant has totally blessed me, because to some people who know us well, they'd say you guys are kind of opposites. But it's really, really blessed me. It's blessed my wife, my children. So I've just taken the position of, I don't see a lot of things the way he does, but in the end, it's been a huge blessing. So the 50-50 thing starts to almost just diminish in terms of its importance. It's more, we're doing life together. And it comes down to the littlest things. It's amazing.
One little thing in answering your question. We've kind of agreed that one thing we won't do is take our disagreements home with us. And I would say, as I look back on it, the times I've violated that have hurt us. And when you take something home to your wife complaining about your business partner, they carry it a whole lot differently than we do. So the next day it'll be over for me, it's not over for her. So we've agreed we're not doing that. And for the most part, I'd say it's worked out really well.
What are some of your personality traits? You said you're both very different. What do you think are your personality traits that help you become so successful as partners?
You handle that one.
Well, I'm a lot more fun. No, I think,
They're laughing.
yeah, I know. One of the things that we've talked a lot about over the years is Grant is really good at team building. He played a lot of sports his whole life growing up. He likes team building. He likes the idea of it. He likes bringing a group of guys together and charging the hill and all that. I kind of like buying the hill. And so there's kind of a difference, which the people that have been with us through all this, they've said, look, you got to value those gifts. You have to see that Jerry's happy to go out early in the morning and stripe the field. He doesn't want to play on the field. He doesn't want to watch the game. He doesn't want to talk to he's happy to go out there, stripe the field, make sure it's perfect, and then Grant takes the team out there and they win. And that's really helped us to see that and to see, hey, there's a gift I have. One of the things Grant always says, nobody plays 20 questions better than you do, which when we go in and buy a business or do a deal, that engages me. The idea of once we buy it, taking the team out there, I'm like, hey, I'll see you this afternoon. So those are differences in terms of how we look at things and how our temperaments work. But we always kind of walk away saying, boy, when the two of us are really engaged, it's really fun. So I don't know if that helps.
That was kind of my question. How many years has this been? You said
38, but we're not counting.
38. So how old were you? How old were you when it started?
We met the night that Nixon resigned, August of '74.
So, I mean, like, in a partnership, I mean, you're sitting there and you meet someone and you say, I cannot move forward without this person. There's something that clicks and you're just like, it just makes sense to be in this partnership. But I mean, you've come so far, but at that time, did you know immediately, like, wow, this person's, filling in this gap that I don't have, and this person's filling in this gap that I don't have? I mean, was it like just an illumination for both of you that, like, this is what we're doing, we're moving forward, or was it kind of like over the years you realized?
I would say it was just over a long period of time. I mean, truthfully, when we first met, we wanted to have a company car. I mean, so, it's kind of like, hey, is there a way we can get a car out of a company? I mean, this is clever. We'd like to have a company car. So, it's kind of grown from there. And I think all these deeper things of life, if you will, just kind of creep in as you do start doing life and you start having teams of people around you.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, you think of the successes and failures in a business or in a partnership, and I think back in 2008, can you maybe take us through a time where you were dealing with a failed business and how you worked through that? Many times in a partnership, there's blame or there's just difficulties dealing with a failure, and your experiences from an example of a failed business, if you had a failed business. But just take us through that, and what did you learn from that?
Well, along the way, I would tell you, anybody who's made it 38 years staying together, there's been failures. Okay, we've had a couple of them that trying to think. We had one in the 90s that was particularly painful for us. We got into this recycling business. I think we were a little too far out in front of it, and we had people like Waste Management, things like that were interested in it and said they'd pay one-time sales on it, and the thing was growing like crazy. And we made a fatal mistake. We took the show on the road and put a duplicate facility up and leveraged it up really big. And then there were problems with the formula of making the pellets to recycle. And we had a lot of friends and family money involved in it, and we had to put up the white flag and orderly work through it. And it was millions of dollars, and we were embarrassed by it. I think the thing that kept us together is trying to figure out how we're going to communicate, how we're going to navigate unraveling it. And I think we both look back on it, and it was a very painful time. I think one of the things we tried to avoid is establishing blame and having what I call a debt hangover or relational hangover from people that had invested money in it. When money's involved, strange things happen, and people get irritated. And I think at the end of the day, we looked at each other and tried our best to figure it out, and then tried our best to communicate it. And in this whole thing about trying to believe the best in each other, we spent a lot of time talking about how we would do those things, how we would work through the process, how we would liquidate it, how we would disperse the proceeds. And again, it was painful. We made it through. When you're in the middle of it, you think this is never going to end, and it's so painful, but you do. And I'd say the second thing that we went through, we had sold the business at the time, and we're involved in private equity, and this downturn hit, and the phone doesn't start, it's not ringing like it did, and the sales start to drop, and I think we had 450 people at the time, and we had to lay a lot of people off, and that was really painful. But if you didn't do that, then the enterprise would have failed. And the enterprise made it through, and we look back on that, and it was a very painful times, difficult discussions, and I think, for me anyway, the strength of knowing that Jerry and I were together in it helped me get through it. And this is not a big community. so you bump into people you had to let go. And so I think, you know, those are two examples that we have had. And again, I think anybody that's been together as long as we have, you know, the strength of the relationship is really when you can talk about what your losses have been, not what your great successes have been. Because I think it's the losses that'll tear you apart. It's not that you did so terrific on this deal or that deal. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that was good. Yeah, go ahead.
Has there ever been a business that you look back and you regret perhaps selling it, perhaps too early, or perhaps hanging on to it longer?
I would say back in the 80s, we were in the very front end of the computer products game and had a lot of success in the early 80s, and margins were huge. And, I think in that situation, we had a couple of partners join us. They were kind of more in that space, and we really enjoyed that ride until the industry changed from where you'd buy like a word processor to being where word processing was done on a PC, and then all these programs came in. So it really came from being an individual box to being a systems integrated box. That transition was almost like moving from being a Chevy dealer to being a motor mall. And a lot of Chevy dealers didn't want to become motor malls, and those guys, as we know, are all gone. So for us, the challenge we faced with these partners is they love being Chevy dealers. And we kept saying, look, we've got millions in this gig now, and we need to become a motor mall. And they didn't like that idea, so we sold it. And my regret looking back is, man, we could have made a fortune if they had been able to make that transition. But we weren't computer guys. We were just finance guys in that situation and building it. So that's one of the regrets I think we carry around is, boy, that could have been something.
Like, I think there's been a lot of those. And I think that, you know, for me anyway, it's not looking back, it's kind of looking forward. So the what ifs, I think we're trying to redirect more towards the what if we get agreement and move forward on the next one, as opposed to look at the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that slipped away that we couldn't get agreement on. And I think the value of being able to talk to Jerry about, you know, the things that are bothering me. I'll tell you this one really kind of personal story. My dad came over, and this is before he passed away, and he's older, and he said, you know, my dad and I used to talk about a lot of things, he said, but you and I, you know, you don't bring your stuff you're wrestling with to me. And he said, I'd really like it if you shared something with me. So we were going through this. We had a leasing company at the time, and we were, one of the problems in leasing computer equipment is when you get to the end, the value just generally isn't there. Okay, and we had some large residuals that were coming up, and I said, okay, Dad, I'll tell you one thing I'm concerned about is, you know, I explained this residual problem, and I wasn't sure how it's going to come out. He said, well, what are we talking about? And I said, I don't know, there's $10 or $12 million at risk here. And he goes, $10 or $12 million, how do you sleep at night? And he said, I can't deal with that. And he went home. And he called me the next morning, and he said, I haven't slept all night. What are you going to do about that $10 or $12 million? And I thought,
So much for talking to Dad.
I said, thank you, Jerry, for listening. Anyway, it's been quite a run. Anybody else?
Yeah, Jerry, I have a question. You talked before about the fact that many of your major decisions hired and everything else, you both interviewed them, spent a lot of time. And when you first described to me, I said, that's really inefficient. I mean, isn't Grant better at that? You're better at this? But you spent a lot of time together doing some things. And talk about how that worked and how the result was, what the benefit was.
Well, you know, we can beat this being together thing. I think all we would report today, looking back, is it seems like to us, like, why wouldn't everybody do this? But we know it's hard. And so when you're sitting and interviewing someone, or you're trying to discern who you're gonna, and everybody will tell you in business, you know, the biggest decision you'll make is who you're gonna put on the bus, or whatever word they want to use. So I think we found that we do have different personalities, we do have different interviewing styles, I would say. And so as we collaborate on people over the years, it's really resulted in, and we can say we're that smart or whatever, but it's resulted in our making better decisions. One of the things we're engaged in right now is trying to figure out how do we continue to work together and work with young people who've come and said, we want to be you. Which, you know, everybody wants to be Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel. I never heard Rich and Jay ever sit like this and talk about just their relationship. They talk about their successes and the things they did together. But anybody who's been in a partnership knows that you get behind the curtain, it's not easy. As we're trying to do this with young people, we had a couple guys come to us and they said they wanted to do this 10, 12 years ago, and we said, well, you know, we'll help you any way we can. So they found a little business. And in helping them, we said, look, at the key to this for you, that you don't know anything about this business. You're like us. When we bought our first business, I didn't know anything about the products. The thing looking back that we realize is in sending two young guys into a business that someone else built, someone else has the culture, someone else has the history, and that someone else is going to walk out that door, and all the light's going to come around to you two young guys, who everybody in the building is looking at as privileged citizens. Your dad bought this for you. So every customer, every vendor, and every employee is going to try and take advantage of you all at the same time. This is what's going to happen to you. It's happened to us over and over and over. So we told these two young guys, your assignment is to do every meeting together. Customers, vendors, and employees. That feels totally inefficient. And the more you're here in this business and the more you experience this business, everything in you is gonna say, this is getting inefficient. I can handle that employee, I can handle that vendor, you go home, your wife's sick, whatever. And we told them, if you do any meetings apart, if we hear you do any meeting apart, we're gonna fire you. Because we were experimenting with it. Because we look back, like answering these questions, we look back to what was the magic? Well, the magic was, frankly, just being there together and reacting. Because we're really taking someone else's business and trying to make it sustain and then make it better. So these two young guys, fast forward now, it's been 11 years, they're still in the same physical office together. They are the best representatives for this idea that we know. So I think our report is, if you can gut it out and do it together, it works. So.
Have you had kind of a central hub office where you ran your various businesses from that was just the two of you? Or have you hung your hats at kind of your main business at the time? How have you done that?
We've done both.
Okay.
And right now it's at the former Homemakers location.
Okay.
We're looking for a little office space too, so. Well, Claire, we're getting on,
How are we doing? Got 10 minutes.
Who's got
Bob's in charge.
Yeah, who's got another question or two? We got another 5 minutes.
You talked a little bit about you have a board. How much does that play into your decision making, you know? And I guess maybe what level of conversations happen there? And then how did you choose those people to bring into your life?
good question. I would say they kind of chose us and we brought them alongside to help us when we looked at the things they were involved in and saw what they were doing. And I would say that the people that are on have weighed in on a lot more than just our business decisions. They've weighed in on our families, on how we're handling things personally, some of the choices we've made. So they've kind of had open boundaries to have at it with us. And I think it's been very beneficial for us.
Have your children, have you been able to engage your children in any of your business affairs?
That's a good question. I'll let Jerry handle that.
When we started, we were in our young 20s, and we had grown up, I'd say, in kind of middle-class families, but neither one of our families were business families, and they weren't people who had any extra money floating around. And we had, like all of us, you go to school and you always knew who the rich kids were. And so we had a bit of an attitude toward the rich kids. It's like, those kids had free stuff. We earned everything we had. And so we looked at each other and said, okay, now when we're starting out on this adventure, we're not going to hire our kids. Because if you're a child of a business person, you're either looked at by the other employees as being privileged, or you could outwork all the employees and you still wouldn't kind of feel like you're getting the credit. So we just had this little attitude, and I said, and my wife came from a business family. They had all kinds of drama going on all the time. And so we just said, hey, we're young guys, we're just not going to do that. Well, fortunately, we had girls first, as children. So by the time the boys came along, we were in this groove, and we started having professional managers who were smarter than we were, and so it was kind of working for us. And the first person who came along was one of my son-in-laws, and said, hey, I got a friend from college, we'd like to do what you guys been doing. And so I brought it to Grant, and I said, we have this agreement, we're not doing this. And Grant said, no, I think maybe we ought to rethink this. And so since then, we've been kind of in the process of rethinking and looking at things. But it begs the larger question of how we want to finish out our lives and learn how to be mentors. It's kind of like all of a sudden waking up and realizing you're a grandfather. It's like, how do you be a patriarch? And what does that look like? And what should I be doing? So it's in that same genre, I would say. But I think having children in the business, it's very akin to being partners in the sense that I think you need help. You need constantly somebody helping with all these little nuances of life.
Have you had common interests in your life? I don't mean about business, but about the spiritual side, about conflict resolution. Have you turned to the same people who did it all together?
Pretty much, yeah, Bob. The people that we would say are on our board, we've been involved with for the last 35 years.
Anybody got a final question? Got time for one more?
How frequently do you think about the end in terms of hanging up the cleats? How often do you guys talk about it? Are you on the same timetable? What does that look like? I mean, you kind of alluded to it in terms of the kids and now being, thinking about being mentors more, but what does the end look like for you?
Well, that's a sensitive subject. we're in the process of trying to work through that right now. And I would say both of us have the desire to be involved with the next generation. And we're trying to sort out what that looks like, both from an energy standpoint and choosing how we spend our time and wanting to do that wisely. So I'd say that one's in process, that I can't tell you we have an exact conclusion on. And I think it's healthy to work through it. So we're trying to work with the next generation and help several of them get launched, and at the moment that is something that is occupying more and more of our time that we're both excited about doing. So that's where we are. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I got a lot. We have talked about it a fair amount. But one of the struggles that we've always had, truthfully, is, we started out, we wanted to get rich. We wanted to be bigger, bigger, bigger. And these guys that are on our board have constantly asked us to consider the idea that this is not home. And so when you really wrestle with that idea of, okay, this isn't home, then how should you spend your time? How should you use the resources and the talents that you have? And so when you take that in and you say, okay, this isn't home, well then it basically has had the effect of slowing us down. And I've told those guys, you've cost me a fortune. But I would say that our wives, our children are healthier because they've been in the mix. And so this horizon thing of, like when do you hang up your cleats? I think we're both at the place of saying we're never going to do that. But I would say we've been moving at a much slower pace than a lot of our friends and a lot of the people that we know who started when we did. And by being slowed up, I think we've gotten to this place in our lives very, very wealthy in ways that are difficult to measure. So it's an interesting question. But I think if you walk around with the idea of, okay, this isn't home, then whether you're 18 or 80, to some degree it doesn't matter. It's kind of how are we going to live today, and how are we going to think about this? Because we are, each one of us are wired different. We have different levels of interest and energy, goals, and all those things. But I think to keep that idea in your head has actually deepened us a lot and has helped us a lot.
I would leave you with one last thought, and that is, when we talk about the things we really value, we've learned that the invisible are the things that are lasting. And relationships are things you can take with you into eternity. And so as we look at our relationship and the ones that are closest to us, the older we get, we are looking at that and saying, that is more valuable than the things you can see, touch, and feel.